In the 9th century Islamic world, scholars operated in an environment flooded with roughly 300,000 raw historical reports concerning the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad. These accounts, known as ahadith, existed in a state of immense logistical disorder. To organize this, Imam Muslim applied a rigorous, systematic filter. He evaluated the entire dataset based on the veracity of the reporting chains and their compatibility with the Quran, compressing those 300,000 reports down to a verified canonical core of approximately 4,000 authentic entries. The final text is known as Sahih Muslim. The structural architecture for this entire dataset is laid out in its opening chapter, Kitab al-Iman, or the Book of Faith. Here, belief is not presented as a vague emotional state. It is a stratified, quantifiable structural system that can be mapped using specific data points. As the early Islamic community grew, scholars required empirical parameters to define who legally and theologically belonged to it. They needed to move past individual opinion toward a standardized definition of membership. Kitab al-Iman answers this problem by organizing reports that categorically define the thresholds of belief. It sets boundaries based on observable actions and articulated declarations. We can extract the primary data from Muslims' text to build the architecture of deen, or religion. This allows us to see how the system operates in practice. By systematically graphing the rules, exceptions, and boundaries outlined in these primary texts, we can reconstruct the exact epistemological map of early Islamic theology. Hadith 0001, commonly known as the Hadith of Gabriel, provides the baseline structure for the entire model. It details a specific encounter where the prophet was asked to define the components of his faith. The first and outermost layer of the system is Islam. The text defines this as a domain of external, physically, and financially verifiable actions, specifically the testimony of faith, regular prayer, the payment of zakat, fasting, and pilgrimage. Inside that boundary lies a second, nested layer called Iman. This requires internal, cognitive assent to unseen axioms, affirming belief in God, His angels, His books, His apostles, the Day of Judgment, and the divine decree. At the absolute center is the core, Ihsan. The text defines this as the spiritual optimization of the outer layers, worshipping as if one sees the divine, knowing that even if you do not see Him, He sees you. The structure of deen requires both external physical output and internal cognitive assent. It functions as a dependent hierarchy where each layer builds upon the one beneath it. The middle ring of Iman is not a binary switch. It exists as a granulated spectrum of varying intensity. Hadiths 55 and 56 reveal that Iman actually consists of over 70 distinct branches. This indicates that faith is a collection of specific, varied traits rather than a single monolithic feeling. The text identifies the absolute highest node in this spectrum as the declaration of Tawheed, the affirmation that there is no God but Allah. The lowest node on this same spectrum is a civic duty, the act of removing an injurious obstacle from a public road. Intermediate nodes connect these extremes. For example, the text identifies modesty as a branch of faith, serving as a bridge between abstract theology and social conduct. This framework shows that profound metaphysical belief and basic community infrastructure are structurally part of the same unified system. This system is volatile. Individual behavior and choices actively alter the state of these internal nodes. Hadith 104 explains how major sins affect the model. It states that an adulterer, a thief, or a drunkard is not a believer while they are committing the act, indicating a temporary degradation of their internal state. This is distinct from nifaq, or hypocrisy. Hadiths 111 through 113 outline specific behavioral markers for this state: lying, breaking promises, and betraying trust. A hypocrite simulates the outer ring of Islam through physical actions, but they possess a void inner ring. They perform the prayers and fast, but the internal nodes of Iman are inactive. The system creates a clear taxonomic difference between a believer who commits sins and a hypocrite who simulates belief to mask an internal absence. To see how these boundaries were enforced, we examine a case study from Hadiths 176 through 178. During a battlefield raid, an enemy combatant is cornered. Facing imminent death, he suddenly utters the profession of faith: "There is no God but Allah." The soldier, Usama bin Zaid, kills the man anyway. He deduces the declaration was a deceptive act of self-preservation, a false simulation of the outer ring. When informed, the Prophet issues a severe rebuke, asking, "Did you tear his heart in order to find out whether it had professed or not?" This establishes the system's ultimate epistemological limit. Humans are barred from adjudicating the internal nodes of Iman. The external declaration of Islam forms an inviolable legal shield, regardless of suspected intent. This architecture is complex: 3 concentric tiers, 70 fluctuating branches, and rigid boundaries separating sin, hypocrisy, and legal protection. The final data point needed to find the bedrock of the entire structure is found in Hadith 46. The Prophet identifies the ultimate right of God over his servants as pure tawhid, that they should worship him, not associating anything with him. Despite the volatility of sins or the complexity of the 70 branches, maintaining this single axiom acts as the ultimate guarantor against eternal punishment. Imam Muslim's Kitab al-Iman is a structural map, defining the precise architecture of human submission, belief, and the boundaries of salvation.